Welcome to the Climate Hour. I'm your host, Bob Grove. Today, we're going to talk about climate policy and collective climate action. We as individuals know that we can do things that reduce our personal carbon footprint, things that make us healthier, more secure, save us money, all while helping the environment and reducing climate change. But we also know that it's going to take collective action to fight the most egregious impacts of climate. And to act collectively, we must engage with our governments to create positive climate legislation and then engage with that legislation to make real world change. A good example of this is the United States 2022 Inflation Reduction Act. As the name implies, the goal of the legislation is to reduce inflation, but it does that by investing in domestic clean energy production. Analysis by the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office says that the Inflation Reduction Act raises $738 billion from tax and prescription drug reform, and then spends $783 billion on new clean energy infrastructure and climate change mitigation. This is the largest climate investment in US history. If fully implemented, the law is projected to cut US greenhouse emissions by 40% by 2030. So how do we as individuals engage with this legislation to turn these goals into reality? We're joined today on Zoom by James Owen, Executive Director of Renew Missouri. James was previously an associate circuit judge and has served as Missouri's public counsel and as expert witness in dozens of energy-related cases. James writes a film column for the Columbia Daily Tribune and is currently writing a nonfiction book about an unsolved murder in Southwest Missouri. Hi, James.
Hey, thanks for having me, Bob.
John Dolan is the executive director of Missouri Solar Energy Industries Association. John has served as a trade associate chief executive for over 19 years. He's a former fourth-term Missouri state legislator in both the House and Senate, a public military office, and a former military police and public affairs officer, and has served with the Missouri Army National Guard. Hi, John.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
So the Inflation Reduction Act has been around for what, 2 years now? How's it doing overall? James, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it was signed into law in August of 2022. We are still very much into the implementation process of that. As your listeners and viewers know, anything the federal government does is going to be really slow. And when you're talking about deploying that much money, and when you're talking about deploying that much money, you're also talking about it going to states for those states to administer it and to make sure it's going to things that are more specific to that population, more specific to that infrastructure for the energy there. It's going to take some time. As an example, Missouri, it was announced in April of 2024. A year and a half or so after that was signed into law, that they were going to be getting $156 million for a Solar for All program, which is going to help benefit, among others, low-income customers and benefiting from solar. It was just awarded. There's been nothing done to administer that money, to get that money to Missourians. That's going to take a long time. That could take over a year to even get to the point before that. So things are moving well, but things are moving slow. And I think we're going to start seeing some real progress on that, but it still might take a couple of years.
Yeah. John, how's the Inflation Reaction or IRA doing?
The clean energy expenditures are going to be significant, as James mentioned. And knowing government like I do, that always takes the rules and the delivery mechanisms. I think they're embracing many aspects of it really well with the funding sources and coming through the states. We've got the Environment and Energy Reinvestment Authority here. I think it's the EIERA, and a good board. And they are executing an RFP. The minute the award happened, they were working beforehand. And they're executing an RFP to set up a website to get Solar for All and the other elements of their proposal to get the grant funds rolling. I think that's a big part of it. Now, of course, my members, mostly 85% solar installation, sales, design, manufacture, and other authorities, they see it right away with their customers on proper projects, be it through REAP grants and be it through tax incentives. The good news is that the production tax credit and the investment tax credit and other things like buying an EV gets you that money off. And then they're learning a lot now about domestic manufacturing, very big, and a lot going on there when it comes to add-ons. So you can go 30%, 40%, 50%, and really create new clean energy projects through those immediate incentives. And we're waiting, as James said, for the implementation and participating as a leader like James is in making sure that money is delivered and in the right way and to the right place at the right time.
So you're both solar people. I mean, John, how is the IRA impacting solar in general?
Wow. I have a fun time with it because James is such a leader in our field, and Renew Missouri is a wind and solar organization and does so much. And here we're a growing and vital affiliate of SEIA, but a small trade association. So I'm up against it, David and Goliath, with the utilities from a legislative standpoint and the actual deals that are done to put it in the commercial and residential environments, and some large scale members as well. And James is there fighting for the consumers and making things happen. I think for solar, it's all positive because it's the most forward leaning clean energy, ready to go. Call it shovel ready, like in my Senate transportation days. It's the shovel ready projects. I mean, we could just fly with the right incentives and the right grants. We can make anything happen and quickly, where many other things like our hydrogen hub and our other things, wind is a product of other arguments or other implementation or larger infrastructure on the front end.
Jump
So
that
it's going
question
really
to
well.
you, James. Yeah, it sounds like it. James, you're solar, IRA and solar.
Well, yeah, I mean, John's right there. I think you're going to start. I think you're seeing people invest in solar. I think you're seeing, the industry see uptick in that. I think one of the biggest challenges is going to be, especially for a state like Missouri or any conservative state, and dealing with those utility interests, is the fact that our state laws might not exactly allow for as much growth as the Inflation Reduction Act would allow for. As an example, while we are trying to encourage people to put solar on the rooftops, we're trying to convince businesses to put solar, when they're
And the
uh,
warehouses and everything. Yeah.
warehouses and the land next to their warehouses and that sort of thing. There is limitations on how much solar they can produce. There's limitations on how much they can share that with the grid. If you don't own your house or you don't own your business, the ability to, say, subscribe to an independent solar array, which we call community solar, isn't even allowed in this state. We've been trying to change that law for a number of years, but it is just it's just something that we are not going to be able to take advantage of. And that solar for all money, as an example, some of that goes to community solar. But will an independent producer or a nonprofit be able to take advantage of that? Under the laws right now, they wouldn't be able to.
What about other states? I mean, you guys obviously work in Missouri, you know that. Are you seeing the same pattern in other states, or is there different trends?
One of the things that I had the fortunate pleasure to do after I left the legislative work that I did and becoming a trade association executive, I was in a healthcare related industry, long-term care, and I was the CEO here in Missouri for 8 years, and then I was also in Jersey, and I was raised and born in New York, New Jersey area. So I got to see how others did it. In the case of solar and the advancement of clean energy, obviously certain states are ahead. Minnesota is doing great things. The regulatory structure in an urban and rural environment like Colorado is better on certain things. So we look to that. Ohio is featured prominently on domestic manufacturing currently because of the one big solar module plant was there or company was based there. So we all have a fight. And what I learned, it's more urban rural than conservative and liberal. And it's more your regulatory structure under your Public Service Commission. And in my case, I'm doing better with the investor owns and their commitment to clean energy, or their forcing by a public regulatory authority like the Missouri Public Service Commission. We can do better on that than we can with rural electric co-ops and municipalities. So the policies of enabling legislation, allowing community solar, is going to be the key to maximizing the benefits under the IRA. And it's the key to the everyday solar, whether it's a farm or it's a house, and every kilowatt and megawatt in between is being fought at different levels for different things, just like the diverse society we are. Not in my backyard, utility regulation, funding, commercial development, incentives, and each state has it differently.
I interviewed the chief energy officer of Hawaii recently, and just comparing states, they've taken a very progressive stance on the IRA. and renewable energy projects going in everywhere on their big island, which is the lowest hanging fruit there, because a lot of land, less people. They're on track to be totally renewable electricity production by 2025. So an example of a state taking the lead and showing what could be done if these programs are implemented.
Mhm.
What
Yeah,
about
the small scale in Hawaii is always, and the cultural there has always encouraged certain things, or they've been limited by where they live and where they are. I learned as a new person to this industry, starting my third year, a lot about the West versus the East and the remote versus, or the new versus the old. And it can happen anywhere. The Solar for Schools program in Minnesota, the embracing of clean energy in certain states with regulations that are better, like Illinois on net metering. Those things are great for the start. I think the biggest pull is going to be the draw, or the base load generation that we need. We need a certain amount of power. So I think that wakes up states to saying we better get in the game. And I think that can turn minds, no matter what the ideology, fast, if they're willing to do business and want to get stuff done.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this shouldn't be about ideology. I mean, clean energy is just profitable from all perspectives, and it's good for the environment. James, any thought on international? I know IRA is a United States law, but I mean, are you familiar with similar type legislation in other countries and how those might compare to the IRA?
I will confess I am not.
Okay, that's fair. I don't want to put you on the spot here.
No, it's okay. But I mean, one of the things I would say is, if we're going to address the issue of climate change, we're going to address the issue of global warming, it has got to be a unified front. If the United States itself took care of everything in regards to moving towards renewable energy, we're still not going to solve this problem. That's the truth. If we were able to accomplish that in Missouri, it's not going to solve the problem. So, I think that's why it's important that we have national leadership, and that we have leadership at the national level who is engaged on that issue, that care about that issue. And, and yes, unfortunately, while it shouldn't be an ideological issue, because I think there are a lot of reasons, I think there are a lot of things that are important about clean energy that all areas of political spectrum should like. I mean, to me, it's going solar is absolutely, is something important. If you're a libertarian, they literally, their motto is going off the grid. I mean, you can't do that unless
You
unless you're
can't get
using
farther
solar.
off the grid than that, right?
That's right. And so, for me, what we would like to see is, no matter who is in the leadership at the national level, that they are engaging with international leaders on this. Some states are doing it as a result of necessity. Some are doing it because they just simply have too much population and too much industrial demand, and they have to produce more power, and they have to do it quickly. I mean, I think you look at countries like China and India, they are having to look at, very much an all of the above approach, just to meet that demand. So, in terms of what the United States is doing, I think we're doing our part. But it is going to be important that everybody else is doing theirs as well.
Yeah. John, any insight from
Just had my
from the
29th
Trade
anniversary to a
Association point
first
of view?
generation German American. So I've
There
always
you
looked to
go.
Europe on the energy and the engineering side of the high tech countries being innovative. And it's always been great to see that innovation. I think James is right when you talk about the high tech and the high demand needs of an India and a China, or the social democratic mandates or tries and attempts of the historic Western civilization, Western European nations. You're going to see that pop. Then I would point out, in your more less developed countries, it's going to be a necessity as well, because now the technology allows so much more lighting and pumping and livestock watering through solar that you didn't have before. So you can go off grid without the multi-million-dollar laying of the main line and the transmission. So you're going to see a lot of mini solar. You're going to see a lot of independent solar, and that is happening internationally. I also know from fighting the questions when somebody says, is it environmentally sound with your modules? and I have to explain how clean energy is really clean, and that a module, you're not going to get cancer, you're not going to support slave labor, you're not, these are political type issues that have been created around it. Well, those modules also get reconditioned like old Chevrolets and go to other nations, or they get utilized even though they have a lot of life left in them, because another country went for a newer model and the older model still has a life and they get shipped. So I think that explosion is going to be a part of a clean energy solution. Of course, it's not the volume that a China, India major projects do, but like our hydroelectric, you can do that on the Hoover Dam and you can do that in the backyard. I think that's going to be really neat for solar and for clean energy, and it already is.
Yeah, I think market forces are underestimated, and that's very nonpartisan. We're seeing clean energy that is producing kilowatt hours cheaper than coal and gas at this point. And even for the public utilities that are maybe looking to make a profit a little bit off of that, I mean, once they have the infrastructure in, they're producing, tariff energy for free. I mean, the sun, the wind, whatever, that's producing energy that they're selling with no investment. They don't have to haul the coal in, they don't have to haul the gas. So at the end of the day, they're just more profitable and they can pass those savings on to their consumers or not. But we can all recognize, whatever your political orientation, that clean energy is profitable. You mentioned wind there for a moment, Jonathan. What about the other renewables? I mean, in terms of the IRA funding for green energy solutions, what about wind, hydro, hydrogen? What are you seeing?
I think one of the things, the one person I know trying to do Missouri's first hydrogen hub is going gangbusters without government subsidies, but there are aspects of it where they could apply, of course. And I think when you look at a regulatory environment, you want to see something that maybe isn't even invented yet be treated as fairly as something that's going strong. The challenge with wind, of course, is how the states set themselves up. And in Missouri, we kind of guessed at the tax rate, and we have certain climate and wind capabilities in certain areas and not in others. So I think those realities hit. I think it's really neat to promote the best of solar and how utilization is commonplace in almost every environment. You don't have to have massive amount of land. If you've got rooftops, you don't have to see it if you've got a bunch of arbor vitaes. So I think there's a lot that you can do there. There's nothing that's going to hurt the environment with agrivoltaics coming into being. We're showing the farm community that. So I think if we just get through the misinformation and we get to the facts and we get down to business, you have an open for all and an all of the above solution that has to be regulated appropriately. What I see on wind is the limitation for those who 10, 20 years ago, when I was in the Senate, 20, I guess, that they didn't do it right or they didn't restructure since. So it'd be better if they look at it and look at capital costs and look at the tax and reduce accordingly for the great production it can be. And I think they've done it with biodiesel. They've done it with agriculture in ethanol. So why not do it there? They're trying so hard in nuke. So I think it's great in the clean energy thing to see those lessons as lessons learned and hit it hard to say, I've got you a package and a solution today that works for tomorrow as well as today and is fair to all. And it's all of the above. So if we invent cold fusion tomorrow, we're rolling on that too, because that'll be another source,
Sure. James, wind. I know Renew Missouri works in both wind and solar.
Yeah, I'm much more optimistic about wind. I think, with the same tax credits that are available, with the opportunities that are available. I mean, right now we're seeing a lot of investment in solar in Missouri. We have seen historically wind investments. I mean, we have a number of wind farms in the northern part of the state, southwest part of the state. I know there's some talk about about building in the southeast part of the state, which is not typically a place you've seen a lot of renewable energy deployment. I think the other thing that you're going to start seeing more of a proliferation of, and it's not just because of the Inflation Reduction Act, but it's also because the technology is improving, the costs are coming down, but battery storage, utility scale battery storage, coupling that with utility scale solar, coupling that with wind, even having smaller residential batteries that can complement rooftop solar. I really think, one of the complaints that you hear, or I guess one of the critiques you hear about renewable energy is this intermittency, well, the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine, that kind of thing. But, we can address that issue pretty simply, and we can do it in a way that a lot of other states have done. Minnesota's done this, Iowa's done this, Illinois is doing it. It's not science fiction. It's not something that's only been being done in, loopy liberal states. It's something that's a reality. And I think that and Missouri needs to get more serious about it. I don't believe the utilities in the state have been as serious about battery storage as they can be. And they're leaving money on the table. So,
Absolutely.
for me, and then not only just battery storage, but I also think for large scale solar and large scale wind, one of the things that the IRA is not necessarily addressing, although it does a little bit, is our transmission infrastructure, our grid. There is a lot of stranded wind and solar out there that we could be taking advantage of, but we cannot because our wires are not where they need to be. Our transmission is not where it needs to be. I get that it's a very politically fraught topic, transmission lines, eminent domain, taking of people's property. I was born and raised on a farm. It's got a power line over it. I know it's not something that's it's not something that every farmer is excited to have a transmission line going over the parcels of their property. However, if we are wanting to be serious about meeting the demands of where we're seeing manufacturing going, where we're seeing electric vehicles going, we are going to need to get that. We're going to need to get that power delivered. So I know there's federal law that addresses that. There are proposed federal laws out there on permitting reform that very much needs to pass in order to make sure that we're getting that power where it needs to go.
I'm curious because, we see the windmills on farmers' properties and we know they're getting some sort of payment for those windmills like they did for the old oil wells. Is there payments for running transmission lines through people's property?
Well, there's the one-time taking, for the easement. Typically, it is a one check. But yeah, you're right. With wind and solar, I mean, one of the things that I see an advantage of as far as utility scale solar and wind is the fact that it's a new income source for farmers. It's a new income source for agricultural areas. It's a new way to generate tax revenue for school districts in rural areas, which are hurting right now. They are suffering right now. So many of our Missouri rural school districts are 4 days a week now because they just don't have the money to compete with other districts. We need to fix that. We need to give these communities more options. We need to be looking at this as a serious, viable economic opportunity. And so, yeah, there is money that goes along with the transmission, and certainly I know there's people that could argue that it could be better. I know Missouri law has addressed that to where you have a certain type of property, like it's a piece of property that's been in your family's name for a significant amount of time. There's more value attached to that. But wind and solar, that's a great opportunity for a lot of people in those areas.
Truly the maximization of the back 40 if I've ever seen it before, because it triples the value. So of what that acre was producing or not producing. And, one of the things you got to get through is the practical application of the fact that most of our solar developers do go for those transmission areas. So it's concentrated our fights in particular counties, and we've seen the backlash or the profitability. You can see both sides. And you've got to get in there and kind of massage that. I learned with the advent of fiber and broadband in my time in the Senate as Senate Transportation Chairman, and we were just trying to take a ditch on the side of the road, dig down and drop a line. This is a lot more than that when you're talking huge utility transmission rather than just a little fiber. And that right-of-way acquisition process is detailed. It's profitable. It can work. It adds to jobs. We're remodeling Interstate 70 to all the traveling public out there. There's going to be a lot of right-of-way on right side, left side on there. Not many farms, but more the overpass and the commercial things. And you got to cut a hell of a check. But I got to say that without a doubt, we have an opportunity there to really maximize it and do better than we've done before, to see where our infrastructure is. And I think states grow with the necessity and the demand. And hopefully our Public Service Commission is studying that right now, which I think they are, of what's that demand going to be and what do we need to do it. And that's our chance to go in and advocate for the clean energy side as a part of the solution, and to not see them roll over to old practices of just coal, to innovate and do something new. And I think we've got an opportunity. And I think that's when leaders like James and others took advantage of opportunities like that in Missouri previously. And Renew Missouri continues to do that. and Musia wants to be a part of it from a trade association business leader standpoint and talk about this. Every factory and metal building should have rooftop solar. And we need the utilities to work with us. It's the lack of sophistication or infrastructure in the rural area that gets everybody into their heebie-jeebies and feeling the wrong way. And I think we can definitely do business. If we've done it with plants, sewers, and highways before, we can do it with solar moving forward.
James, John mentioned hydrogen hub. The IRA, does it provide opportunity for the other energies? I mean, hydroelectric, hydrogen, other things?
Yeah, there's some minimal funding for that. There's also funding that involves carbon capture sequestration. There were some provisions in there to kind of address some of the other alternative options for trying to address carbon emissions, CO2 all the noxious items going up into the air. But mostly it is focused on what you think of as traditional forms of renewable energy, wind, solar. There is some money for some other forms of technology, but yeah, battery storage is a big one. Energy efficiency is another one where you're going to start seeing funding come down, which, for me, I don't think we should have any conversation about clean energy without talking about efficiency, because it's my opinion that the cleanest energy is the energy you don't use. And, the state of Missouri is applying for a significant amount of funding to help people with energy efficiency projects for their home and their business. A lot of the big utilities in Missouri have energy efficiency portfolios that offer rebates and products to their customers. And I think that's as important, if not more important, than renewable generation.
You're listening to the Climate Hour. I'm your host, Bob Grove. We're speaking with John Dolan and James Owen about climate policy and collective climate action. So, James, let's talk more about the state energy efficiency programs. I mean, what's happening in Missouri, for example?
Well, right now we are seeing kind of a shift in philosophy with our regulators, with our utility commission. There has been a number of years, about 15 years, since the state of Missouri passed energy efficiency laws that make it more cost effective for utility companies to offer such programs and products, and this sort of thing. But now I feel like there's a sense that it's not as good of an investment as previous commissioners have believed. It's not as good of an investment as regulators have approved of in the past. So it's a real challenge as whether or not that's going to continue being a viable option for the customers of Ameren and Evergy, the two largest utilities in the state, and where they're going to be able to get those options for energy efficiency. I know there is discussion about whether or not we are going to try to create an alternative to the Energy Efficiency Investment Act that is currently the law. That maybe what we're going to try to do is create a law that will develop a single unified program that can help provide energy efficiency programs to customers of all utilities. And that's something that's being discussed at a very high level right now, and it would take a number of years to get put into place. But I would have some hope that we would be able to get something like that in place if we aren't going to be able to rely on these individual portfolios.
And when we talk about energy efficiency, we're talking about weatherproofing the home, rebates or something for upgrading your appliances and such, right?
That's right. We're talking about appliances. We're talking about upgrades to your home. I mean, when we talk about energy efficiency, we're not talking about turning off a light or running your dishwasher at a certain time of the day. That's conservation, which is also important. But it's hard to have that as a unified program that can be administered by a regulatory body, reducing demand through what is in your home and how that is delivered. That is ultimately the best way for energy efficiency to work.
So tax bates are credits to replace your appliances with more energy efficient units. John, what are you seeing in Missouri and other states on energy efficiency programs?
Well, I saw a lot from the private sector in my experience in the last 2 years. And what I saw was people coming in, a vendor came into our membership and came to our event, and they certify. that efficiency for the homeowner as a part of the process when they're normally going solar. The idea would be to get in there and get every yellow label and know exactly what you're producing or demanding and how much you can save. I think that's a huge part of the process that James spoke well to. I also had the honor of participating in the first net zero building in St. Louis, kind of a new construction or reconstruction. And it was interesting because we're sitting there at the ribbon cutting, and they did it on their own. They did it because it was the right thing to do. And I said, wow, there was a certain kilowatt load that they got. And I said, you couldn't get 2 more and get over 70? And they're like, yeah, it's that tree over there. So they were being preservationists, but also going for the kilowatts. But it was a wonderful ceremony with clean energy advocates bonding with the local utility, which was Ameren in this case. And, I gave up my speaking spot for the proper investor-owned utility to come in and get their clean energy guy front and center. So the more of that pie chart we make, the better we make our 3 investor-owns. I think it's 3, James, right? Liberty, Ameren, and Evergy. And I see some great interconnection laws here. So on the efficiency side, it's going to take incentives, though. So the state has to get a champion, has to get a budget number like rebates for solar. We had cut a great solar provider, and James's group came together on a deal. And we had 5 years of great rebates that stacked on top of anything else you could do. It's like the add-ons in the IRA. You can get your 30% for your electric vehicle, or you can also get the add-ons for domestic manufacturing, union or apprentice or prevailing wage programs, et cetera. So you can get these things going. I think it takes a commitment to investment and public-private partnerships and a commitment to clean energy at the same. But the number one thing James touched on that it takes is a commitment by the regulators, bureaucrats, legislators, and people to work together and really want their state to be a leader like Minnesota has been on solar for schools. That would take me, the newly elected, when it happens, or current governor, and then to go in and basically say, hey, we need X tens of millions of dollars as a buy or a loan program. And then these schools are going to save exponentially more, and it's all clean. That's helping rural schools. So I like to see things in partnerships like that. That's how the best highway projects got done. That's how the best communications projects get done. That's how we will get the best when they're ready to play and get stuff done. That's how the best clean energy projects are getting done.
Yeah. What about
and efficiencies being a big part of that.
Absolutely. What about the state public service commissions? I know we've touched on those a little bit. James, are they leaning into the IRA?
Not as much as we would like. We would like to see more encouragement of the investor-owned utilities. Those are the utilities that are regulated by the Public Service Commission. Take advantage of this money. However, I would maintain that the utilities in the state are still continuing to rely on the fact that the laws allow them to build generation, build transmission, and to get a rate of return on those. The utilities make money not just by selling electricity, but by building things. And if they take that money from the federal government, they aren't going to be able to get the same kind of ratepayer ROI, that return on investment, that they're used to getting from the Public Service Commission. So what's been frustrating from our vantage point is that they have all of this opportunity. They have all this money. And not only are they not doing it, but no one is holding their feet to the fire to say, like, you should be using this federal money to do this. The reality is, Ameren could be taking advantages. All of them could be taking advantage of this, like the Associated Electric Cooperative, the power supplier for our rural electric cooperatives. They're not regulated by the PSC, but they could take advantage of this money. And they're putting forth insufficient applications for it, or they're just not doing it at all. But they aren't
flat out anti-competitive on certain levels and don't want to see that change come. And that's tough, especially in this case. We've seen a more positive approach from the IOUs to solar because they know it's a part of their clean energy. They have certain commitments they've got to make. And the appropriate time is when they're coming for a rate increase to make them do something positive on clean energy. We don't have that with the lack of sophistication in municipal utilities and the almost bullying and definitely resistance of the electric cooperatives. But other states, you see in the news, are doing things that make sense and reaching into there. So we need that balance to come, and it only comes through carrot and stick, through regulators, leaders, and business cooperation. So I'm hopeful for that. I really am, and I want to see that happen. So I want them to let me do something, or make them do something for us in clean energy when they're asking for something from us in money. And that is appropriate. That's the way to play it.
John, I'm curious, round numbers. I mean, how much money are they leaving on the table? The IRA has what, $750 billion available for these different programs? How much money are the states leaving on the table by not doing this?
Nothing yet because, well, we all got cut. Like many states applied for a certain amount. Missouri went in for about $250 million on solar for all and other elements that involve community solar. So if they do not allow, if the investor-owned utilities or the municipals or co-ops oppose James's excellent leadership and his #1 priority, which Mosia shares also as a priority, and the Coalition for Community Solar Access, and we don't have real community solar. Now they're all sending out brochures saying sign up for community solar, but it's not as real as a third party marketing a defined service area off of a particular solar installation or farm and really delivering those sales for the consumer in that microcosm. If we don't allow that, and we call that like, oh, you're trying to be a utility. If we don't allow battery storage credits or battery storage processes at all in the legislation, then they're trying to cut batteries off before they even come into being fully. If we don't incentivize that, we cut our hand despite our face and we leave tens or hundreds of millions on the table. But in the one large grant and the tax incentives, it would be unfair to me say that they're leaving them there now. They're just not taking advantage of what's there. If they oppose us and we don't get our full 156 on solar for all, it's 156 million and climbing. If they don't jump into it and do real things and allow solar, it's 30% of every solar project, which is in the hundreds of millions too each year. So we've got, or tens of millions, hundreds of millions nationally, billions. So we've got a chance to do some real economic development, job production, and clean energy together if they don't stop us. And that's the key in Missouri policy is a couple of folks are standing in the way for the almighty dollar.
And I'm hearing what, hundreds of millions, a significant part of $1 billion sitting there on the table for Missouri. All we have to do is get the laws changed so they use it.
Precisely. Not to mention the fact anytime a utility invests in generation, and John mentioned this number, at a minimum, they are leaving 30% of the value of that production on the table. Could be up to 40 to 50 to 60%, depending on what kind of, whether they're using domestic source for that production, whether they are able to, use prevailing wage employees for that. The reality is that if you're looking at, Ameren or Evergy or Liberty Empire investing in dirty fossil fuel generation, they are at a minimum leaving 30% of the value of that generation of that particular plant on the table because it's not a renewable source. They're a third of the value.
Right. And if we were talking investment, we would want to balance our retirement qualified accounts with our liquid money, our aggressive growth with our simple money market. And we would play that whole pie game. And we would have our buckets and our pie chart. And in better days of Missouri leadership, inspired by Renew, and we created people that created Mosia were helpful to it as well. We got the credits. We got the minor mandate. We got the fair pie chart divisor that made them do it and be fair. So before the new coal plant goes in, before a new second nuke plant comes to enable them to handle the new demands, they should open up that pie. And they certainly have to get through the rural electric cooperatives and the munis to do it. Some of the munis are so lacking in sophistication or knowledge, and it's not the old days of getting power there. They really should turn it over to the larger co-op or to the investor owned, and the commission should regulate more. A good example is that you can stop solar in a county in Missouri if you reach a certain 5% standard. But there's no disclosure regulations of these supposedly regulated utilities. So they don't have their city council or their board of their co-op telling them, show me the form. But our 3 investor owns have to produce that same report every year. Make the others do the same, make the playing field level. We'll pay our fair share after a value of solar study, and then we can all march forward together to cleaner, more efficient energy. And a part of that will be clean coal or nuke or this or that, whatever it takes to keep the lights on. But we're going to be a huge winner in that if you just allow a fair playing field.
You mentioned munis. James, let's talk a little bit about municipalities and nonprofits. How do they access IRA funding?
Well, it used to be that you could only get a tax credit and if you were investing in something like solar, which is what the Amerens and the Evergys and the Liberty Empires of the world still have to do. What's advantageous to a non taxable entity, like a municipality, like a rural electric cooperative, which is a nonprofit, they now have an opportunity to take a direct payment of whatever that tax credit would be. So as an example, if they were to like, I don't know, let's just do a round number, $10 million investment into renewable energy, like a solar array. If a municipal utility or a rural electric cooperative did that, since they don't pay taxes, they don't get a tax credit, but they would get $3 million back from the IRS for doing that, which is something they've never had the advantage of before. So again, it is at a minimum 30% that they would actually be taking advantage of and getting that direct payment. There are also a lot of other pots of appropriations that can allow for municipalities to take advantage of grants, to take advantage of those payments. One example of what the rural electric cooperatives would be able to take advantage of is there's a program under the IRA called New Era, which is specifically designed for rural electric cooperatives to help finance projects that would help wean them off of fossil fuel generation. Missouri's co-ops did apply for that. We have not seen the application. They were not successful in getting an award of that money. Several states around the country were, places like Minnesota, Wisconsin, etc. They were able to see funding for partial funding for their projects, but the demand was very high. You saw a lot of applications for that money, and it was $10 billion, which is a lot of money. But certainly, when you're talking about trying to transform an entire fleet of utilities around the country is not a significant amount of money. So we're hoping that the fact now that rural electric cooperatives see the benefit of this, initially they did not. Now that they do, we're very hopeful that maybe we can see a New Era 2.0 show up that might be able to help provide some more resources.
John, what are you seeing with munis and nonprofits? How are they benefiting?
The one thing I saw was my member interaction on a recent member call, and a CPA firm coming into membership to help people understand what the credits are, how it all works, and to have a small company be able to do it. But they're also reaching out to your school districts and your churches and your community organizations to tell them that if you do this on this large rooftop, that you're going to receive this check, where before you had to own it on a residence and it was a percentage of your tax liability, and perception was that it was going to upper middle class. With solar for all and the wealthy, with solar for all, and with this incentive program that way, it can be highly political in where it goes or how, or only to those who really get into it and are smart to take advantage. I wouldn't call it political as much as advantageous to those thinking more capitalistic while running a nonprofit. So they can get something for it, but it's for doing the right thing. And I recently had a good friend who's a trade association executive for a healthcare related one, and he asked me for referrals because he's doing solar on his new building just because that incentive makes it so worthwhile, and he already was committed to the concepts of it anyways on a new construction, where he might not have been a customer without those two elements of new construction or remodel and the incentive. I saw the same with the big first light bulb change in long-term care facilities when the capital credits were allowed versus when they stopped. You still had the energy savings, you still had better lighting, you still had a lot of reasons to do it, but it was that capital or that depreciation and playing that capitalistic game of that ROI that helps. So I see in the nonprofits and community organizations that know, and the municipalities, they're all eligible for the first time and their eyes lit up. And they said, we got to rethink this thing. That's exactly what you want people to do, rethink it. And I think the most optimistic to be when James and I have tough days with a tough state trying to do this, our optimism is that the dam will break when everybody else is doing well. So it was great to see that co-ops are getting in the game. Nonprofits will be spreading the word. Businesses are already taking advantage left and right. And the commitment to clean energy is one of the biggest inspirations. But then also it's dollars and cents on the bottom line during budget time. And if they're going to get a new 350 and they're going to have a dually carrying their big horse trailer, well, let's put solar on the top of the horse barn too, because that diesel truck's going to put out a lot of bad, emissions some days. let's put solar on the roof and mitigate and accentuate clean energy. And I see both happening and us getting better and better with EVs and EV deployment of charging stations. All of this is going to be every year is going to be a new idea and a new concept and a new thing, just like hydroelectric and nuke was in the day.
Cool, cool. We keep drilling down here. Let's get to our listeners directly. I mean, how can homeowners and renters take advantage of IRA funding? James?
I think what you're going to see is when this solar for all money becomes available, and when that is, when that is being deployed, I think you're going to start seeing benefits to homeowners for that, particularly kind of the moderate income homeowners. Same with renters. We're hoping that some of that money is going to be able to go to apartment buildings where right now landlords might not be incentivized to put solar on their rooftops. Maybe this will give an opportunity for that to be there. Same with the energy efficiency money. Once that is applied for, and hopefully once it is awarded to the state of Missouri, there will be an ample opportunity for people to apply for that money, to get qualified for that money, and see some of those resources get put to investing in their home. Again, we still have some time before we can get there, but it'll be here in the next year or two. I think that's one thing that Missourians will be able to look forward to.
So I'm hearing the IRA money is being distributed through the state. There's not a lot of direct avenues for individuals to apply directly to the IRA.
Yeah, my understanding is like what you're seeing with Solar for All and with these energy efficiency programs like Homes and HERA. Those stand for something that I don't know off the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, it's like a lot of federal money, right? They get sent to the states and they are kind of tasked with knowing what's best to do for the Missouri citizen. And so, instead of the federal government getting credit for that, then the state of Missouri gets credit for that, which I'm not sure that's a great system for the federal government. But I mean, certainly there is, but certainly already you have a lot of energy funding like LIHEAP, like weatherization, already being administered by the state. So, it's ultimately, it's ultimately going to get done like with that. So.
That's very well said, James. I would only add that it's common. You have match rates and transportation projects based on use. You have healthcare match rates, social service matching, all administered. The entire Medicaid program comes through states. It's a normal facet. It's also exceedingly patronage or political to land it back in the district. But the states are, in our federalist system, an appropriate vehicle. It's that money left on the table that you were so perceptive to mention, Bob, that is the big risk. If you do not do enabling legislation or you do not follow the rules of Solar for All, if you do not qualify for an IRS check straight to you because you made a mistake in the process, if you don't seek that guidance and do it the right way, you don't get there. The one thing I'll say is there's a territory out there in Puerto Rico, and you saw in the case of Puerto Rico with storms, a bad grid and other things, they went more direct from energy. So there's still the feds doing stuff, but then there's this offshoot in this enormous multi-trillion-dollar spending package of almost printing money that they are investing in clean energy never before. They must have a grant and appropriate structure. We need to adapt to that. Utilities need to adapt to that. And people are doing a great job of seeking advice to adapt to that. And the websites are frankly really good. So if you can do it in healthcare, the Affordable Care Act, you can do it with this. And a lot of money is going through those avenues and a lot of people are being served. So I think it can go well. And James and I will be seeking to involve ourselves with the investment authority that does it and to be the advocates in the room with our members saying, this is what the feds intend. Please do it that way. Don't leave this money on the table. Please come here, hold the utilities to the fire there, or don't just give all the money to the utilities in this case. Spread it out for true clean energy in this manner. Don't just give them a big fat credit. And that's something we're vigilant about for clean energy's benefit.
So we've been talking about power production. IRA also covers electric vehicles. Can somebody talk about the rebate opportunities there?
Sure. Depending on what kind of vehicle you're getting, depending on what kind of income you're receiving, you have this opportunity to take up to $7,500 as a rebate for that. You can get the rebate, or the car dealer has to take that right off the top, and they are able to get that money back. I think still the biggest challenges that you're going to see with electric vehicle deployment is the fact that we don't have a really great charging infrastructure. I think people have, range anxiety, as they call it. They are worried about whether they can get from one place to another. I certainly know that I travel a lot to southwest part of the state through a lot of rural areas. I'm not sure I'm completely comfortable with having a fully electronic vehicle. I have a hybrid vehicle right now. Unfortunately, I can get around. I can get around town pretty well with that, but not on big trips. I think that's going to have to be addressed. I know that there's some efforts to address it. But yes, and I think also what you're hearing is that there are some car manufacturers who have somewhat broken some mold, and that they're going to be able to have batteries that are charged quickly and can run for a long time. And I think you're going to start seeing those in a couple of years. And ultimately, those are the kind of cars that we're going to start seeing on the market. And that's going to be what we're going to have. So we're going to have to adjust to it eventually. I know a lot of people think that it's a fad or that it's something that's being foisted upon them. But ultimately, I think when you look at global implications there, the fact that China has said that they're only going to be requiring electric vehicles on their roads, I mean, it's not as though the manufacturers are going to start like just making cars for one country, especially when there's so much demand in a country like China, and then just saying something else for some other part of the world. I think you're just going to start seeing more electric vehicles on the road.
Yeah, but
And it's all,
And China's behind that infrastructure. They're putting charging stations in everywhere, so they're creating the infrastructure to make EVs happen.
and we can't do a dozen of them, yet we have 8 billion hanging out there. When we're more effective, when we talk less about mandates and more about execution, everybody's fine until, what is it Mike Tyson said? Everything's fine in a fight until you get punched in the face. Well, you got to get out and actually lay down and have it. We had a public service commissioner move to electric vehicle and infrastructure deployment in his new job. And I saw him recently and I asked him how it was going and what's happening at this big oil company that makes them excited about it and what'll happen in the deployment. He had a few answers, and we're going to need a few more. And we're going to need that to be that well. Of course, a huge communist nation that has to do it because of its population and its central control can do it. The question is, think to the horse, think to the advent of the auto. Think to the locomotive giving way to the airplane. Think to the TV taking over the radio. We can do this. And it's normal. You just got to keep the polarization, and you got to keep the policy being effective, the polarization being lessened, so that we can be effective and get stuff done in the policy that enables it to go quicker. Because more people would have had phones had we done X. More people would have had, air services in their backyard if we did Y quicker. And instead, some of the nation was flying and nobody else could find a plane. So we have to do that. And we've had innovation come through conflict, innovation come through policy, innovation always coming through people. That's what's going to be. So I want to see these people that I used to be, a recovering politician, a legislator, actually execute in their job to enable an all of the above solution without a conflicting mandate. And I do have range anxiety. So I had it even in a regular car. So I want the hybrid version. I want the both. And I want to see that. But anybody I know that's been in certain electric cars, they've been very happy.
Yeah, yeah. And I hear what you say about range anxiety, but we're seeing cars with 350-mile ranges. I mean, for an urban driver, that gets you, that cover your day and back for night charging. So, I mean, there's a niche for those. Certainly
right. The key is
interesting.
to basically not tell the Teamsters they're out of a job and they're in an 18-wheeler
Not
that
at
isn't even
all.
invented yet, before you actually do install so many electric charging stations that people notice, and it's the talk of the town. Execute first. The best, the worst, you got the best mission in the world to go defeat tyranny. If you didn't execute the Normandy invasion, you don't defeat that tyranny. So you've got to execute, and we've got to put this infrastructure out. That's the key. Good government, excellent execution by the people, so hopefully served by that government. I'm excited about that potential, and I just need to see the underlying policy allow me to unleash it.
Yeah, I hear you, John. And like you say, I mean, the technology, it's going to happen. I mean, this change is going to happen. It just becomes a question of when. And it's
Exactly.
interesting to look at, compare Missouri to Hawaii. In Hawaii, they've already got the community solar installed, and people are benefiting from that. They've got the incentives going back to the homes from the IRA. So,
And they
we
have the
can see what
culture of
happens.
Mahalo guiding
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
So they were set
exactly.
up as
So
a
they're
small
ready to
community.
go. Yeah,
Yeah, that
and they're
doesn't happen
ready
on
to
the
make it
streets of New
happen.
York. So
it
it's a
doesn't.
little
No, it
different
doesn't.
in New York. But New York's
But
got that power to go upstate and community solar an entire county.
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
and Honolulu or other islands, other cities can be the model. They're perfect microcosms when you have a culture like Hawaii doing something smart like that. What a great example, Bob. We can
Mhm.
extrapolate that to a very large California or New York if we have to.
Mhm. So thank you for joining us today. Where can our listeners go to learn more about your work, James?
Well, they can go to renewmo.org or they can follow us on almost every social media platform: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and TikTok. Yes.
TikTok.
TikTok.
Speaking of communist China, just type in Renewmo and you should be able to find us.
And we're
Sean,
mosia.com, MOSEIA, a part of the SIA affiliate. And we're really strong nationally, loving what we've gotten from the advocacy of SIA and the great people that we have working there. So moseia.com, and my numbers and contact info is right there. And we're happy to please and excited about Missouri's clean energy future. Thanks for including us.
that's
Yeah.
great. Thank you. And thank you to our listeners. We welcome your questions and feedback. You can learn more about the Climate Hour at climatehour.net. That's climatehour.net. This is the Climate Hour. I'm your host, Bob Grove.